Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 305, cover dated October 1993. So the cover here featuring Rogue and Bishop by Duursema, who is the guest artist for the Interior comic, inked by Richard Bennett. Featuring Rogue, as I said, and Bishop, and well, I always wondered at the time what was going on with her arm and hand, whether those were mummies type bandages or what. There's no cover caption to indicate what's going on with her, but obviously she's in some distress there on the cover. But what's going on becomes plain when we open up the issue to the Interior story. So let's do exactly that. And this is the splash page here. We've got a bunch of armoured goons, and it turns out that they are stalking and have in their sight lines Bobby Drake, who is out in New Jersey, and he's calling on his girlfriend Opal. And here we've got a double page spread where these guys are firing off their weapons, and Rogue is there to save Bobby and Opal. So the title of the story is The Measure of the Man. The creative team is Scott Lobdell, writer, Duursema, spelt wrong here in the credits, penciler, Jose Marzan Jr., inker, Chris Eliopoulos, letterer, and Joe Rosas, colorist. And let's continue along, and we have Rogue here referring to recent events, the return of Magneto, and how the X-Men are on the alert. And then we have one of the goons finally speaking, and speaking in a kind of like a computer code. Inforec, designate Rogue, care to test your invulnerability parameters. And then Bishop intervenes to help her out, and to everyone's surprise, the goon degenerates into a pool of biochemical ooze, as Bishop puts it. So there's a little mystery here about what exactly is going on with these guys. And the one that Rogue slammed into the tree has gone the same way. So Rogue makes the point, it's crazy. Why would these guys self-destruct? Anyone who'd attack the X-Men ought to know we wouldn't kill them. So what indeed is going on with these antagonists? And then we have this little scene between Opal and Bobby. So Opal last seen in issue 301 when Bobby was supposed to go on a date with her, but he got called to Dallas, Texas for the emergency there with Forge when he was attacked by Trevor Fitzroy. And so this is the first time he's seen her since then. And she's looking for an explanation about what's happening. And she says here angrily, "Stop treating me like some kind of innocent bystander out of central casting. I deserve some answers," and she wants them now. Something to note here about Duursema's layouts. On this page, we need this little arrow to prevent us from going here rather than here. And there's another page like that exactly as well. And kind of like she needed to rethink those layouts, because you shouldn't need an arrow directional device to show the reader around your layout. It should have that logical left to right and down the page flow. Now she gets quite annoyed here with Iceman, where he says that it was that Cerebro identified an hour ago some genetic anomalies in the area around your house, and she says you felt someone might have been trying to get to you through your girlfriend. Exactly. Instead of getting you all worried and concerned, we decided it'd be better if what? She says, better to use me as a bait, as a decoy for who knows what kind of psychopathic supervillain that's gunning for you. Let me guess, Professor Xavier, Storm and Cyclops are all out tonight? And he says, yeah. And he says, how do you know that? And he says, because only you could have thought of a plan this insensitive. So, basically, this is the breakup between Opal and Iceman, and it's been coming for some time. And she says here to him, you and Hyro want to get yourselves killed, playing dress up and using your mutant powers, fine. There are those of us who prefer to live in the real world. A world I guess I thought I could have pulled you into when we first started dating. Believe it or not, Iceman, there are many people who are more than happy with their normal, ordinary, boring lives. So the bystanders here, because a crowd gathers, basically tell Iceman to get the message and give the girl a break. So he departs on one of his ice slides, but thinks to himself, take it from an expert, people, alone isn't a real fun place to be. And then we switch scenes to Washington, D.C. Now this issue, the story takes place between Uncanny X-Men 304, The Return of Magneto, and X-Men 25, when Professor X takes a strike team to Avalon to face off against and deal ultimately with Magneto. And so here he is in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital and home to the world's most powerful political movers and shakers. And he is there to meet with the ambassador, Louis Sainte Croix. And they meet in public here, obviously at the ambassador's residence. And he shakes hands with Professor X, Professor Charles Xavier. I've been a long time admirer of your work. So they exchange pleasantries and then go out for a private talk. And then it becomes revealed, and Storm is in tow, that they're old friends, or they know each other going back decades. And so the ambassador says to Professor X, and this is the reveal here about the nature of their relationship, I've been a member of your mutant underground since we could both stand up straight, Charles, and this is only the second time we've ever met in person. So this is something that's been established by Lobdell in particular over recent issues, that Professor X has a mutant underground, that he's got agents and contacts, and that he has been in touch with over decades as part of his fight for peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans, and also in his role as one of the most famous advocates for mutants on Earth. And in their conversation, the ambassador makes the point that he wonders whether Professor X has agreed to finally let the world learn the truth about him, that he is a mutant. And Professor X says, if I thought I could do more as a mutant instead of posing as a human, I would do so in a second. The political climate in this country being what it is, however, I feel my anonymity is paramount for the moment. So he wheels off, and Storm asks the ambassador what's going on, and she's a little confused about how a human would be willing to risk everything in order to work with mutants. She says, as an official in a mutant hostile government, the revelation that you're providing the X-Men with highly classified information is tantamount to political suicide. So she wants to know, why does he do it? And he says, sympathetic humans are not as rare as you might think, Ororo. Speaking for myself, it began over 50 years ago. It began with Lenore, his wife. So he tells the story of an automobile accident, and his wife is gravely, as it turns out, fatally injured. But the injury triggers her latent mutant power, and we see it here in this panel. And then when the ambulance arrives, the emergency team are horrified by her appearance, and they're hesitant to take her on board the ambulance because they think in some regard she was tainted, and maybe they might become infected or whatever. So Sainte Croix takes his wife and tries to bring her to the hospital, carry her to the hospital, but she dies, of course. And he says, you ask, how can I do everything in my power to help? The question is, how can I not? And you know what? Something else as well is that this character, the ambassador, he will prove to have a family link to upcoming characters in the Generation X upcoming story. Or sorry, not story, but comic. And we'll get to that in due course on the channel. So then the scene switches back to New Jersey, and the X-Men's Blackbird hovering in cloaked mode, and we've got Iceman, Bishop and Rogue aboard the Blackbird with one of the goons, the third of the goons, and Bobby wants to question him. Bishop tells him to back off. They want to get back to the X-Mansion and use one of their telepaths to probe the guy's mind, but Rogue says, you know, with her mutant ability to absorb another person's personality, one little touch ought to be enough to get them the information they need. But she gets more than she bargained for. And the man explodes like his compatriots. And then we see here in this anchor image exactly what was going on the cover. We're told that Rogue is unable to choke out the words, the truth of the situation to which he's now a living, writhing testament. When the trio of assailants were originally identified as genetic anomalies, that's by Cerebro. It was not that they were not mutants in the classical sense. Draped as they were in unidentified uniforms, however, it was impossible to know what was going on beneath their battle suits. Impossible, that is, until Rogue began to mirror the effects of the bodies beneath the costumes, much to her regret. So we'll get a little more information on what these guys were and what's happened to Rogue subsequently in the issue. So then we have Professor X and Storm arriving into the warehouse district of Washington, and we have some conversation between them about how Professor X wants Storm to help him appropriate a new prototype, and this is connected with the story in X-Men Unlimited number 2, where there is an exoskeleton invented and created by a multinational task force, and the exoskeleton is capable of cloaking an individual from Magneto's electromagnetic sphere of awareness. So Professor X wants that technology so that Forge might adapt certain aspects of it which will serve needs in the days to come, and he wants Storm to go steal it for him, and she wants to have a chat about this. By appropriate, you mean you wish me to steal this information for you? Is this what we've come to? We become thieves in the night? I ask you, Charles, how much of your own personal dignity are you willing to sacrifice to stop Magneto? And here, Professor X says, if you're not up to the task, Storm, I will do it myself. So she's nothing to say to that, but clearly not happy with the Professor. And of course, Storm's origins include a stint in her youth as a street thief in Cairo, Egypt. And we'll see that reference very shortly. But then we're back at the Blackbird over New Jersey. And Bishop uses his powers to take away to short out Rogue. So he says here, let's hope my own bioelectric abilities will short out hers long enough to literally pull her together. So it works, but with her power, whereby if she's in physical contact with somebody, flesh to flesh contact, she absorbs their memory, psyche and powers. She absorbs a little bit of Bishop's psyche, and she shouts out Bishop's sister's name, Shard. And we get a little reference here for the first time in a long time to the X-Trader subplot. Who witnessed? Who killed the X-Men? And that goes all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 288. And so we've got Lobdell reminding us, the readers, of that little subplot. And Bishop here saying to Rogue, everything's going to be just fine. And then she apologizes to him for the way that she's treated him after he attacked Gambit back in X-Men Adjectiveless X-Men number 8. And she says here weakly, but now I touched your memories, your heart, no idea your life future had been so hopeless. But Bishop there says, let's just concentrate on the here and now and let tomorrow take care of itself. So Iceman arrives, and then Rogue says, the thing was never alive, not in the way you and I would define it. Near as she can reckon, it was little more than a bunch of living skin tissue stuffed into battle armor. And she says that's the good news. She says the bad is that she picked up no coherent thought patterns other than sort of a programming to destroy them. And she did pick out a single word, a name, Hodge. So this, for long-time readers of the X-Books, would put them in mind of Cameron Hodge, last seen at the end of Extinction Agenda. And, you'd believe him to be utterly destroyed and dead, buried under the Genoshan Hammer Bay Citadel. But clearly he's up and around, and we'll see more from him, so to speak, shortly. Then we're back in Washington, and we have Aurora going about this business of appropriating the exoskeleton for Professor X, and she's thinking back to her time in Cairo, Egypt, when she first encountered the professor. And this references a story first shown to readers all the way back in Uncanny X-Men 118. Of course, Bob Harris providing no footnotes for the reader in relation to this. And she remembers, as she casts her mind back, being chased by the professor in Cairo. And then here she remembers he reached out and held her mind with his own, holding her firmly, yet somehow gently in a sonic grip. She was helpless yet trusting, trapped, yet she'd never felt as free. And so she continues her mission and also thinks back to the first encounter with Professor X. Though her dreams have brought her to the past more than once since that day, this time is different. This time she recalls something more, a subtle mind touch. She may never know, for it was at that moment Xavier was confronted by Amal Farouk, that's the Shadow King, and now she wonders, had the damage already been done? She would not see him again for almost 2 decades, about the time young Aurora began to question her role as a goddess, wondering whether it was enough to simply be there for those who needed her. Was she fulfilling her destiny that night? Or was she reacting to a sonic suggestion planted in her head years before? So this is a new little retcon here, very subtle. Did Professor X set something up in young Aurora's mind that would bring her to him 2 decades later for the mission of Giant Size X-Men #1? And so she comes to the professor and she gives him a floppy disk with the information he needs, but she says that she didn't destroy the exoskeleton. She says, "I will not allow the world to destroy us, and more importantly, what we stand for. I will fight for you. Someday I might die for you, but do not ask me again to steal for you, Professor X. I'm an X-Man," she says, "and we have to be better than that." And then we have this silent final panel with the professor bowing his head and not saying anything. And then we've got the lead in to X-Men number 25, when the whole moral question is it better to let Magneto do whatever he wants up on Avalon, or does he need to be dealt with finally? And so that's the moral conundrum that Professor X is considering here in this issue. And of course, this technology he gives to Forge and provides him with that exoskeleton that he uses in X-Men 25. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 305. Some interesting little retcon in there regarding the original meeting between Aurora and Professor X way back when she was a child thief in Egypt. And also this mysterious business of this writhing skin in a battle suit and what that might be, because we're going to hear and we're going to see a lot more about that in coming issues of Uncanny X-Men and X-Men, dare I say, the Phalanx Covenant, yes, crossover. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary. If you did, please like the video in YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.